A 70-year-old man sits on a stone bench inside a dark, freezing prison cell. In a few hours, he is going to drink a cup of liquid poison. It is hemlock. It kills you by slowly paralyzing your nervous system, freezing your lungs from the feet up until you suffocate in complete awareness. But right outside his cell window, horses are waiting. The prison guards have already been paid off. Wealthy, powerful friends have arranged a clean escape route completely out of the empire. All this old man has to do is stand up and walk out into the night. Instead, he shakes his head, refuses to move, and prepares to die. This wasn't a tragedy. It was a tactical masterpiece. This is the brutal, true story of Socrates and how he weaponized his own execution to destroy his enemies and become immortal. To understand why an entire empire wanted this old man dead, you have to forget everything you learned in history class. The official charges brought against Socrates in 399 BC sounded simple: corrupting the youth and disrespecting the city's gods. But those charges were a complete lie, a legal smokescreen. The real reason was blood, revenge, and the aftermath of a devastating civil war. 5 years earlier, Athens was completely crushed in a brutal war against its rival, Sparta. The Spartan conquerors didn't just defeat Athens, they destroyed its democracy. They installed a puppet government of 30 ruthless dictators, known to history as the 30 Tyrants. For one terrifying year, these tyrants ran a regime of absolute horror. They dragged citizens out of their beds, confiscated their properties, and executed over 1,500 people without a trial. Eventually, the people fought back. The tyrants were overthrown, and democracy was restored. But the citizens of Athens were traumatized, angry, and looking for blood. There was just one massive legal problem. To prevent endless cycles of revenge killing, the new democratic government passed a strict amnesty law. You could not legally prosecute anyone for war crimes committed during the dictatorship. So, the politicians looked for a loophole. They needed a scapegoat to blame for the city's collapse. And their eyes landed directly on Socrates. Socrates hadn't participated in the murders. He hadn't joined the tyrants. But two of his most famous, elite students, Critias and Alcibiades, were the literal masterminds behind the destruction of the city. One was the leader of the tyrants. The other was a traitor who defected to the enemy. The public didn't see an innocent philosopher. They saw the man who trained the monsters. Because of the amnesty law, they couldn't arrest him for treason. So they used the vaguest, most corrupt law they could find, corrupting the minds of the young. The entire trial was a political hit job from day one. When the day of the trial arrived, Socrates stood in the heart of Athens before a massive jury of 501 citizens. In ancient Greece, courtrooms were pure theater. Accused men were expected to cry, bring out their weeping children, beg for mercy, and stroke the jury's ego just to survive. Socrates refused to play the game. He walked up to the podium and treated his life-or-death trial like a basic classroom debate. He cornered his chief accuser, Miletus, in front of the entire crowd, systematically humiliating him by proving the man didn't even understand the words written in his own legal indictment. Then, he turned to the 501 jurors and dropped a line that sealed his fate. He told them, "If you kill me, you will not easily find another like me." He compared himself to a gadfly, a persistent, biting insect sent by the gods to sting a lazy, stagnant city to keep it awake. The jury was insulted by his arrogance. They cast their ballots. The result was shockingly close. 280 voted guilty. 220 voted not guilty. Under Athenian law, if just 31 jurors had changed their minds, Socrates would have walked away a completely free man. It was a narrow margin. But the real disaster happened during the next phase of the trial. In Athens, after a guilty verdict, both sides got to propose a punishment. The jury then had to choose one. The prosecutors demanded death. Socrates was expected to counter-propose exile or a massive fine. If he had just asked to be banished, the jury would have gladly accepted it. The politicians didn't actually want to murder an elderly icon. They just wanted him gone. Socrates stood up to give his counter-proposal. He looked at the judges and told them that if his punishment truly matched the value of what he had done for Athens, he should be given free, elite meals for the rest of his life in the grand hall reserved for Olympic champions and war heroes. He was essentially telling his executioners to pay for his luxury retirement. The courtroom exploded in fury. They saw it as absolute, unyielding defiance. When the final vote for the punishment was cast, the margin wasn't close anymore. Dozens of jurors who originally voted him not guilty switched sides out of pure rage. Socrates was officially sentenced to death by poison. Normally, executions in Athens happened immediately, but Socrates got a random 1-month delay. The day before his trial, the high priests had sent a sacred religious ship to the island of Delos. By law, no executions could take place within the city limits until that ship returned. For 30 days, Socrates sat in a low-security prison cell. His inner circle visited him every single morning. One dawn, his oldest and wealthiest friend, Crito, arrived early with a massive bag of silver coins. Crito sat by his bed and laid out a flawless escape plan. The guards were bought. Safe passage was guaranteed to a neighboring city. Crito begged him, saying, "If you stay here and die, the world will think your friends were too cheap and cowardly to save your life." This is the exact moment where 99% of people take the exit. But Socrates didn't move. His response was brutal. He asked Crito to imagine the physical laws of Athens walking right into the cell. He said, "I have lived in this city for 70 years. I used its roads, raised my kids under its protection, and accepted its benefits. If I break its laws the moment they don't favor me, I destroy the very idea of society." Socrates saw the bigger picture that his friends completely missed. Escaping would destroy his entire life's work. If the great Socrates ran away like a thief in the night, it would prove to the world that his philosophy was just a hobby. It would show that when death came, he was just as terrified, weak, and compromised as everyone else. By staying in that cell, he flipped the script. He turned his execution from a state punishment into the ultimate demonstration of personal integrity. The day the sacred ship finally pulled into the harbor, the executioner prepared the hemlock. The prison cell was packed with his closest followers. His wife began to cry hysterically, losing her mind. Socrates looked at Crito and said calmly, "Someone take her home." He refused to let emotional chaos ruin his final hours. Plato wasn't there that day. The records show he was too sick to attend. But a student named Phaedo wrote down the final moments, second by second. Socrates spent his last 3 hours doing exactly what he did every other day of his life, talking philosophy. He debated the nature of the soul and the meaning of virtue, completely detached from the cup of poison sitting on the table next to him. When the jailer handed him the cup, the man himself was crying, apologizing for what he had to do. Socrates took the poison without his hand shaking a single millimeter. He drank the entire thing in one continuous breath. His friends completely collapsed. One man began to wail so loudly it caused a panic in the room. Socrates stopped them immediately. "What are you doing?" he asked. "I sent the women away specifically to avoid this behavior. Calm yourselves and be brave." Following the jailer's instructions, Socrates walked around the small stone cell until his legs began to feel heavy. Then he lay down on his back and covered his face with a cloth. The jailer pinched his foot hard and asked if he could feel it. Socrates said no. The cold numbness crawled up his shins, moved through his thighs, and traveled slowly toward his chest. Right before the paralysis reached his heart, Socrates uncovered his face, looked at his oldest friend, and spoke his final words. "Crito, we owe a cock to Asclepius. Please pay the debt and do not forget." Then his eyes went completely still. For over 2,000 years, people have argued over those final words. Asclepius was the ancient Greek god of medicine and healing. Traditionally, when a person recovered from a deadly, agonizing illness, they sacrificed a small rooster to this god as a thank-you note for surviving. Socrates wasn't losing his mind to the poison. He was sending one last coded message to the world. To Socrates, mortal life, with all its irrational fears, political corruption, and emotional chaos, was the actual illness. Death wasn't the end of his life. It was the cure.